Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. We are in week 4, actually just starting week 4. And week 4, we're going to cover a couple of areas. Two things that I want to remind you of in week 4 that you need to pay attention to, and that is the difference between medical care and health care. And we're going to talk about that in this lecture here in just a short while. As always, I start out your weekly lecture by setting forth the assignments that you have for this week. You have really 2 assignments that you will turn in, but you're also asked to start working on and considering your next milestone in your final project. So with that in mind, you have discussion 4-1. I've set forth the requirements. Please read that discussion before you move on. So I'd pause this video, read that discussion question so you'll understand what we're looking for there and what is entailed. Same thing for the SWOT assignment. I've set forth the prompts and overview for the SWOT assignment. Please take a look at that, review that, see what you think, and as we go through the lecture, pay attention to those areas and aspects that will be involved in the SWOT analysis. And also you need to read your text. Most of the information that we'll cover today will be from the Marketing Case Study Approach textbook. But please go over the SWOT analysis. I believe it's page 52, 54 of the other textbook by Berkowitz. So let's get started on the substantive material that we're going to look at this week. And the first thing that I think we need to look at and discuss here is the 5 P's of healthcare marketing. And for those of you that have had an undergraduate background in business are very familiar with the normal approach and the normal 4 P's to marketing. We've expanded it to include patients, physicians, professional healthcare administrators, payers, and policymakers. That's in addition to the normal historical approach to the 4 P's. And we're going to look at this from a standpoint of patient as physician, as customer, and the physician as a customer this week. So as we go through the material, please keep that in mind. When we talk about the difference between healthcare and medical care, healthcare is a systemic approach. We look at the World Health Organization definition of healthcare or of health, and WHO defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So the WHO has taken an all-inclusive, more holistic approach to healthcare, and that definition has been in place, I believe, since 1942, which is quite amazing if you consider how far back the World Health Organization was looking more towards preventative in healthcare as a systemic and societal endeavor. So what we look at when we look at healthcare, in essence, is healthcare is the definition I'm going to give you. It's the maintenance and improvement of physical and mental health as a community effort both at the federal and state levels, and is especially concerned with the personal and community responsibility for the physical, social, and mental health of our society. And as we move forward in the class, we are going to see, when we look at the community and society as a consumer of health, we're going to see specific marketing efforts towards preventative health care, and we'll take a look at that from that perspective. On the other hand, when we look at the difference between medical and health care, we're looking at health determinants from the health section. When we talk about the major determinants of health care and society, and you will cover healthcare determinants in another class. But when we look at the major determinants, we're looking at the gross domestic product, socioeconomic status, level of education, occupation of individuals. We also look at living conditions and arrangements. We look at health in sense of air quality, water quality. When we look at the United States, we have significant disparities in our health from other OECD countries. And that's kind of interesting because one would think the amount of money we throw at the problem would determine what our health levels are and our health indexes. or indices actually, I should have said indices. When we look at it from a medical care perspective, we are looking at more of a reactive environment, and an environment where we define medical care as what services the patient receives in a health practitioner's offices and hospitals and other care facilities, such as a coronary bypass surgery. When we look at a mortality after coronary bypass surgery, that is a medical care index as opposed to a health index, which would be infant mortality, suicides, other rates that are affected more by society than by the care that has been provided. We're going to look at the 5 Ps from the perspective of physician and customer and the patient as customers. And specifically, we're going to delve into chapters 5 and 6 of the case study approach textbook. One of the things I want to cover, and we should cover it, because when you do your SWOT analysis, you remember you look at the various aspects on the SWOT, and you're going to look at environment, you're going to look at policy. And if you look at the future trends of healthcare affecting marketing, and I strongly suggest you read pages 60 through 62 of the Healthcare Approach textbook to get a handle on some of these future trends, which will be involved in your SWOT analysis. We look at the economy. When this textbook was written, it was written in such an aspect that the economy was fragile. We had growing but slowly growing unemployment rates. We had we had below 2% GDP. Now we're pushing 3% GDP. We're looking at national records as far as income and unemployment rates. Particularly, what's a very interesting phenomenon, and I don't know how to explain it other than current administration's approach to the issues, and that would be the low unemployment rates in historically underemployed factors such as African Americans and Hispanics and women in society. That will affect the health consumer market because that will put money and create decision makers in areas that historically have not been considered strong consumers for the insurance marketplace. We've got healthcare reform, and God only knows what's going to happen there. Obamacare, certain elements I think will be kept. I think we will continue to keep those elements relative to pre-existing conditions. I do think we'll see a shifting of the responsibility for Medicaid to a more 52-48% or 45-55 split between federal and states. In other words, we're going to see the states given more responsibility to pay for their own citizens. The hospital physician alignment, when we look at hospital physician alignment, we're looking at the alignment of physicians in the particular specialty, subspecialties, and alignments with the hospitals they serve and the communities in which they serve. You will note in the prefatory section, the introduction section to section 2 of the case study approach textbook, you will significantly notice that in the Fresno community there are some very serious issues in alignment with physicians and the availability of certain specialties and practices within that particular community. When we look at revenues and expenses, we are certainly looking at revenues which are directly impacted and will continue to be impacted by reimbursement and case rates that are determined at the federal level by the CMS and Health and Human Services. When we look to access to capital, we're looking at amounts available, whether they be through federal and state grants for investment in healthcare organizations, improvement to and or building of new facilities, and that can be in the form through bonds, it can be in the form through grants, and other private investment if we're looking at a for-profit organization. Information technology will remain huge. Historically, information technology had become one of the largest reasons for the need for capital in healthcare organization. That's kind of plateauing off, but will be considered to be an ongoing concern for healthcare organizations. We look at consolidation, closures, alliances, and mergers. I don't think there's any of you that are in a healthcare market where you haven't seen hospitals close or mergers with major healthcare organizations where healthcare organizations like Hospital Corporation of America or Healthcare Corporation of America or Trinity Healthcare or Kaiser Permanente or other major players come in and gobble up existing organizations within your community. There are going to be workforce issues. I think we will continue to see a shortage of physicians, a shortage of skilled nurses. I think we will see more demand on physician's assistants and specialty practice, advanced practice nursing. And then last is smart growth. Too many organizations grow too fast. When we talk about economies of scale, which you will talk about in other classes in some more detail, we talk about being just the right size. And if you notice the Fresno community, one of the hospitals struggling was the 400 plus bed hospital as opposed to the smaller hospitals. When we look at these future trends, please be familiar with these trends as how they will play into the environment, the legal, the policy, and those various aspects that you need to consider when you're doing a SWOT analysis. I'd like to now turn to the physician as the customer. And quite simply stated, a hospital cannot survive without physicians on staff. Physicians on staff are what feeds the hospital customers for a very significant portion of their customer base. Yes, the emergency departments do feed customers to the hospitals, but that is not as significant as planned surgeries and admissions directly through physicians who are privileged and on staff at the hospital. So hospitals must do all that they can to market to physicians to become on staff and privileged members of their facility. And as such, when we look at the physicians and the access to hospitals, we are looking at hospitals being much more accommodating and much more desirous of attracting physicians to on staff. And when you look at the example of the radiology group and the latest and greatest equipment, that is one of the ways that hospitals attract on staff physicians. Another way is the specialty niche, where hospitals are going to specialties like you have hospitals that'll have coronary care units, you'll have oncology units, you'll have hospitals that have specialty units to attract that particular specialty physician. When we look at the process of applying for staff privileges, we certainly have to look at the process of credentialing. Assuming that the hospital is marketing to prime candidates who can credential, then the hospitals are doing their job and they are bringing in the necessary physicians to continue growth and to meet the needs of their patients. Just a side note, when we're marketing to the patient, we also use our specialty physicians and our physician mix as a sales tool to those patients. So there's interdependence. And we're going to see that there's interdependence in so many various aspects of these marketing efforts. Hospitals are completely dependent on physicians. Nobody would argue that point. Nobody would say that that is not true. Physicians are more like customers in many senses of the marketing definition of a customer. However, it's a different arrangement in that they are not true customers in the sense that you don't attract a physician to provide cash to purchase a service. To attract physicians, hospitals will often subsidize or set up doctors in practice. Hospitals will also, when they do this, they will become the business unit of that particular clinic. In other words, the hospital will set the physician up and they will come up with a working or operating agreement for the split of profits. And as such, the physicians will then not have to worry about the business aspect, but the hospital will provide those for billing services, those for scheduling, those employees who are the business end of the hospital. And of course, the physician does indeed have a say in who comes into his or her clinic. Another way hospitals, particularly in underserved areas, will attract physicians is through a little thing called an income guarantee, or a little thing known as a bonus. In areas like Winnemucca, Nevada, the physician's office that I was the administrator for, we had one physician and two advanced practice nurses. And there was an income guarantee that the physician would make X number of dollars per year guaranteed by the hospital. And if he didn't make those, he didn't meet those levels of income, the hospital would then kick in on the guarantee to make sure the physician had a guaranteed income. Also, to get people to come to those underserved areas, you will see large bonuses. And just for fun, if you want to take a look at some of the ads for positions, if you're a nurse, for example, take a look for the positions in Alaska and see what kind of bonuses you could get to move to Alaska. They are quite large. At the same time, hospitals became interested in physicians' practices and actually going in the business of running and staffing and subsidizing physician clinics. We also saw the rise of managed care. In managed care, actually two of the more common are preferred provider organizations or exclusive provider organizations, which is another form of marketing to physicians. The managed care organizations, if they have a preferred provider panel, they want to attract the necessary talent and the necessary array of physicians so they can serve all of the needs of their own census of patients and insureds. So in other words, the managed care organizations want to make sure they don't have to send their patients out of network to specialists because they don't have one in network, because that is more expensive to the insurance company if a patient goes out of network, because they do not have the scheduled fees that they agree to with their own preferred providers. When we look at the patient as customer, I want you to look at the patient from a couple of perspectives. And one is, the text aptly points out that the industry did not like the use of the name or the term customer for patients. And I think a lot of that has to do, and I've given you the two definitions from Merriam-Webster of customer and patient. And of course, as the author points out, one is more active than the other. But I really think when it boils down to nuts and bolts is that physicians always had this superior feeling. Healthcare providers in an industry that is considered highly professional didn't want to think that they were normal business arrangements, nor as a normal business operating entity. Well, when we moved to prospective payment system in the late 80s, that really changed the whole ball game, and now hospitals and clinics and healthcare organizations do treat patients as customers, and they do operate under normal business principles in order to remain viable and profitable. So when we look at the arrangement that I've set forth in the triangle, what we look at is the patient pays in two ways. They either pay through federal and state dollars when they become eligible for Medicaid and they're spending insurance or Medicaid dollars or Medicare dollars if they're seniors with the clinics, or they're spending, if they're a self-pay, direct dollars. So however you look at it, even putting into that third-party arrangement, you have to attract the dollars into your clinic, whether they be insurance dollars or Medicaid, Medicare dollars. The difference, of course, is with the direct self-pay patient, you have a little bit more control over pricing because it's set by UCR, whereas in the Medicare, Medicaid, and insured arrangements, you get a fee schedule and they tell you what you will be paid per procedure, and they set case rates and bundled rates for particular procedures and treatments. So I want to, last but not least, look at the marketing efforts for actually to patients as the customer. And we have to look at several different arrangements, because not only do the clinics and hospitals market to the patient, but insurance companies, not to mention the pharma companies, pharmaceuticals, which create derived demand by their commercials on TV for their product. the durable medical suppliers, the home health industry, and the over-the-counter product industry, and the list goes on as to healthcare marketing efforts to the patient as the consumer and customer. So what we're going to do is when you do your discussion question, I have not outlined it for you this week. I want you to outline your own discussion question. If you look at the way it's laid out, it should be pretty self-evident and straightforward based on the way I outlined the previous discussion question for you. Break it down and make sure you meet all of the elements. And if you did not get full points on any of your assignments, go back and look at the feedback, because I tell you where you lost points and why and what you did not cover. So that's very important. As to the SWOT analysis assignment, you're going to complete a SWOT analysis, determine the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat for one of 3 specific healthcare organizations, their service or product that is identified for you below. Based on your SWOT analysis, you're going to then propose an additional service or product to market for that organization, while also comparing your additional service or product to a competing healthcare organization's service or product. So you're going to have to, whatever you recommend, you're going to have to go in and do a little bit of research on another competing organization's product. The task is designed to provide practice for analysis, service proposal, and competition analysis that will be part of your final project, milestone 2, that you will complete in week 5. To complete the worksheet, please pull up the worksheet, which is a Microsoft Word document. And again, ladies and gentlemen, I must stress, please submit all work in Microsoft Word. I have noticed some issues and problems pulling up assignments in PDF. So once you pull up the worksheet, you review the module resources, review the following web pages, select one of those web pages, one of the organizations, one of its products or services to analyze. And then you're going to complete the following sections for the organization, service, or product that you chose. Part 1 of the SWOT analysis worksheet, you will list 3 strengths and explain what makes them strengths. You will list at least 3 weaknesses and explain why they are weaknesses. You will list 3 weaknesses and explain what makes them weaknesses. I think I did that. I'm sorry, I repeated myself. Listed 3 opportunities and explain what makes them an opportunity. And then list at least 3 threats and explain what makes them threats. And then after you complete your SWOT analysis, you're going to address the following. What additional service or product would you propose to market for this organization and why? In making your proposal, identify a competing healthcare organization's similar service or product, one that you think is effective. And below, identify the service or product and briefly describe why you feel it is a successful product. With that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, this will conclude week 4 lecture and assignments. Please make sure to go over your feedback. If you do not receive feedback or a grade, it could be due to a glitch or an oversight on my part. Please let me know if you did not receive all of your assignments graded for weeks 1 and 2. Also, ladies and gentlemen, as always, if you have any questions, and I'm very happy to say I've had several students avail themselves to giving me a call or emailing me and setting up a time to meet. My email is, of course, p.vanash@snhu.edu, and my direct office phone number is 801-940-2531. Please feel free to call, and I'd rather have you call and get it right the first time than have to have you call and work with me to redo it. So please feel free to call, and I look forward to your submissions for this week.